All right, this week on the show, talking with Mizzou head softball coach Larissa Anderson, who season ended about a month ago. And Larissa, I'm sure you've just been sitting in your office looking for stuff to do since then, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, it's
we're
just
really bored. Yeah, not much
yeah,
going on at all within our
yeah,
program.
yeah. So we'll get into a little bit what the summer's like for you and what you've been up to, but we just want to start very big picture. Like I said, you've had about a month to kind of look back, and I know everybody does the self-assessment and evaluation when the season's over. What's kind of your big picture view of how things went last year?
Extremely proud. On paper, there wasn't really much that was different from the year before. I mean, statistically, it was pretty much the same. And we overexcelled, we overachieved. They really fought, and the players and the staff and support staff really bought into what our mission was this year. And we exceeded it. We absolutely exceeded what the expectations are. And when you go in and your preseason polls are at the bottom of the barrel and you excel and you get into championship games and your hosting opportunities. I mean, that just shows you the buy-in that we had and just the fight. So I'm extremely proud from that aspect, but never satisfied. So always looking to grow the program.
I was going to say when you say you exceeded expectations, you obviously exceeded outside expectations. Did you exceed the expectations you had?
Uh, no, I mean we always expect. I know how good we can be. I know what we need to do every year when I evaluate our players. I know what everyone's potential is. I know what our team potential is, and then it's just a matter of carrying out those duties and those responsibilities and the execution to be able to reach our potential. So as a coach, when you look at 22 players and your staff, and if everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing and working every single day, then you're going to reach that potential. And I felt like we were able to do that. We exceeded. I thought Lauren Krings really led the way, and she's won her entire career. That I've been trying to get more out of her, and she's wanted more out of herself, and she really excelled and carried this team into our postseason run.
hmm It's interesting. You talk about statistically maybe not being that much different from last year. And I talk about this in college football all the time. Like the difference between a great season and a mediocre season is like 4 plays, right? It might be a little bit more than that over a 65 game softball season. But I mean, people ask, like, what's it take to get to that next level? I mean, it takes like one pitch, right? There's not some magic secret
No, and sometimes a little bit of luck. I mean, in our
here.
game, just finding that it could be a jam shot blue pit that just falls in the right time and the right opportunity. But you got to be in the game to have a shot at it. And
hmm
I think what was really special about this team and the buy-in that they had is it was all about the team first and what do you need to do to win? And that was the ultimate goal. So statistically, you don't need 400 hitters to win ball games. You need the right people to have the right quality at bats and the right people making plays. And you could be going 1 for 3, or you could go over 3 with a sac fly in the right situation, and your team's going to win. And that's the ultimate thing. Like everybody bought in to what do you need to do to put the team in the best possible situation to be successful. And sometimes that's situational hitting and quality at bats and getting on base with it with a hit by pitch. And those things go unnoticed in the statistics category.
I know when it comes to roster management and additions, you're obviously limited on what you can say. I know you've announced a transfer from Kentucky in Taylor Ebbs. But can you give us a general idea, like this summer in the portal, kind of the general, not specific players, but what you're looking to add to this roster for next year?
One of our big, I thought our weaknesses were we lost experience in the outfield.
hmm
Losing Alex Honnold and Kaylee Langer was only a sophomore, and then left field was really a revolving door. So looking at who's out there in the portal that has some offensive numbers that can be able to come in and compete right away in the outfield was a priority. Looking at some other things, we lose our middles, but we also have a lot of talented players coming in our freshman class. We have 4 shortstops that hopefully are going to compete for those 2 positions. So that was by design, knowing that we were going to lose Jenna Laird and Maddie Gallagher. And then we lose Lauren Krings in the circle. But looking at it, when we look at the portal, it's who can come in right away and make a difference. We're not going to bring in someone that's just going to add depth or not compete for a starting position. So they have to be better than what we currently have. and with their experience and their level of play. And that's really tough when you're 10th in the country and you're playing in the toughest conference in the country. There's not a lot of options out there. And sometimes you take a chance on some kids and they haven't experienced this level of softball yet. So there's some growth that comes into that. So I think we landed a really good one with Taylor Ebbs, and we're still continuing to make some offers out there in the portal, and hopefully we get a couple more added to our roster.
How do you, and you've coached it at both levels now, obviously you were at Hofstra for a long time, now you're here. A lot of portal activity in college sports tends to be kids looking to make that leap from one level to the next, right? And obviously the SEC is the highest level. What do you look for in a kid that tells you, okay, I know what she did at, a quote unquote lower level is going to work here?
You have to have that success. That's the first thing, and the competitiveness, and the background. Like, what was her travel ball experience like? How successful was she in that travel ball experience? And then if there was any other programs or players that left that conference or that school that went on to a higher level, and how successful were they in making that jump? Because it is such a huge jump in the level of pitching that you see day after day. But I think that the mentality is really what separates, that you have to be really good at hard and really good at being able to respond to failure, because in the SEC, every single weekend is just a gauntlet and a grind, and there's no opportunities to play. I mean, easier competition that can build your confidence up. Like, you got to be confident regardless of what that result is.
Yeah, well, fortunately for you, the SEC is getting way easier. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm curious, just big picture. Look, I think it's been 3 years now. Every day there's, the transfer portal has kind of been the story of college sports. And everybody knows the effect it's had in football and basketball, because those are where people tend to follow recruiting the heaviest. But in your sport, like, how much of a difference, how much has that changed the game, that and NIL? I mean, how big a factor is that, at this time of year for you?
I think it's made a big difference. And part of it is when the SEC and conferences in general allowed players to transfer within conference, because it used to be that you had to sit out a year. So players were just staying at their previous institution because they didn't want to leave the SEC, because it was the strongest conference in the country. And now you're seeing a lot more interconference transferring happening, because they want to stay in the SEC, but they want to find a different opportunity or different chance in a different environment. So it's making a tremendous impact on our game, but it doesn't make our conference any weaker. It actually makes our conference stronger, because people are coming in. With the breakup of the Pac-12, you have the best players in the Pac-12 that are now transferring into our conference.
I promise I'm not trying to get you in trouble by answering this question, but different coaches have different thoughts on, hey, if all of this movement in the portal is good for sports, good for the players. Do you have a general opinion on whether this is better or worse for college sports?
I'm not going to say better or worse. I think it creates just different opportunities. And for so long, especially women's athletics, that we weren't having as many opportunities publicly, and we weren't able to benefit at all from our name, image, and likeness. And now with the public attention that softball has, and the respect that it has in the media and the TV viewership, I mean, there's so many opportunities for these young women now to be able to profit off of their name. But then it comes into play in the recruiting process. Like, there's a big discussion. And when you know that football and basketball are getting a lot of money, these women want to fight for what they feel like they deserve. So now they're being way more aggressive and assertive in what opportunities can I be able to obtain if I transfer to your institution in terms of NIL. And it's also allowing us to be more aggressive as coaches, to be able to provide them with more opportunities and be more creative, so that we're able to bring these players into our programs to be successul.
You've obviously always been, since you've been here, a huge advocate for opportunities for women in women's sports. And it goes beyond just softball. I mean, I actually think it is, from a media perspective, I think it's very interesting now to see, really kind of this summer with Caitlin Clark, women's sports are being covered kind of the way men's sports are, right? And I've always said the true sign that you've gotten some level of equality is if you're covered the same way, if you have people on ESPN saying stupid things and making debates about it every single day, right? I'm just curious, not just Caitlin and Angel Reese, but how much progress you've seen in 5 years with women's sports?
I think the coverage has been amazing. I mean, to see what the NCAA and ESPN is able to do with our postseason, all the way from regionals through supers and the College World Series, and the viewership and how much attention, and having softball games on ABC. I mean, that's absolutely tremendous. I think what's still holding us back is the opportunities for companies to be able to sponsor specifically women's sports. And if you were to get specifically women's softball, there's a lot of bylaws within the NCAA that you have to be an NCAA sponsorship for the entire NCAA in order to sponsor events. So that kind of holds back the money that can go right into those specific sports, and specifically women's athletics. And again, that's way above my pay grade, and I'm not really in those conversations. But I think if you're having women's softball outdrawing men's college baseball, and I haven't seen the numbers yet for this year, but in 2023, there was more viewership in the women's softball than there was in the College World Series for baseball. I think the women need to profit from that viewership, and we have to have some more sponsorship dollars to be able to go back to those institutions and also the sport.
One of the most common questions I get from Missouri fans every spring is, we've done this in softball, why are baseball and softball different? And I'm not asking you to comment on Missouri baseball or that program, but what has Missouri done in your time here that you think has helped allowed your program to reach kind of the levels of success and the place it is in the sport?
I mean, I think the first thing is that there was success before I got here. So it wasn't like I was building it from nothing. I mean, they've been to the College World Series. They went 3 consecutive years in 09, 10, and 11. So I needed to figure out how they won and why they won. And there's a lot of Midwest talent, and it was really working hard to keep that Midwest talent home, but then also do something different than the rest of the country's doing. And that's really where our culture comes into play, and creating an opportunity that these players want to be here, and I'm going to get the best out of them. But we got to coach them up like crazy. Like, I'm not going to bring in the cream of the crop player. I would love it, don't get me wrong, but right now it's maybe a little bit below the top player in the country, and we got to coach them up to compete against the top players in the country. And when they buy into that work ethic, now we can have that success. And that's really where we've had a lot of momentum in being able to do so. When you add in the environment that we're playing in, and the fan base and the support that we're getting, now it's a really great place to play. And when people see that on TV, and we can really put that on display, it really entices kids to really want to play in that type of atmosphere and that environment.
And I know in really throughout the season, but especially in postseason play this year, you were kind of able to appreciate that in the moment, right? Look around, and there are, I forget, I think it was 3,000 people, something like that, announced for most of those games. Obviously a sellout. I mean, it's not, I think, something that a lot of places are used to, looking around and seeing not only the stands filled, but the full hill. I'm curious how much appreciation you've had over the last couple of tournaments you've gotten to host for what the fans have done in that place.
It's incredible. And I think we maxed out on day 3 of that super regional over 4,000. We were second in the country in single game attendance, and number 1 in the country in postseason attendance. And that's remarkable for us to be able to do that. It just shows you the support and the energy that's behind our sport, and the excitement that our game provides. But I have to give a lot of credit to our players. Like, they are so engaging to the fan base and give back, and, walking along the outfield berm and high-fiving kids as they're hanging over the fence, and trying to get the fan base more involved in who we are, and opportunities to be able to see us outside the field, and different banquets and events and dinner on the diamond and our golf outing. So now they feel that they know these players on a personal level, rather than just seeing them perform in a game.
Out of left field question here, but along the lines of that environment, how come in college softball and baseball you can play all season to earn home field advantage and get all that comes with that, and then 1 out of every 3 games you're the road team in your own stadium?
So next Tuesday, there's an NCAA championship committee in Indianapolis, if you want to join me. Okay. That is a big discussion that you fight like crazy for your seating, and then you have to be the visitors. It's been one of those bylaws that have been written probably 25 years ago, and it's archaic, and we need to continue to adjust with the times. I completely agree with you.
Okay, well, if Shapiro's Deli in Indianapolis is on you, I will come to that meeting. That's
Okay.
the deal. Um,
Deal.
we mentioned earlier the SEC. All you're doing is adding the two teams that played for the national title this year. Your view of this league going forward, which I assume is now going to have a full quarter of the NCAA tournament field every year.
A couple things. Yes, it makes the SEC even more powerful, and that's awesome. The public attention and the notoriety and the respect that everybody has for the SEC, and really we set the bar, and that's just going to continue to grow the sport. And when I'm sitting on committee meetings, everyone always wants to know what the SEC is doing because they want to follow our lead. So that really continues to push and grow our sport. Yes, it makes it tougher because we have now, the number one and number two team in the country, but we're not adding more games. So we're still playing our same number of conference games. I think it's going to be really interesting for Texas and Oklahoma to have to play the SEC schedule because, as we know, the Big 12 wasn't as strong the whole way through, top to bottom, as the SEC's been. So I think it's going to be a little bit more adjustment for them to be able to play this level of competition throughout the regular season. But in terms of us, yeah, we had two more really strong teams, but we already had 12 other really, really strong teams going into it. And with the same number of games, it keeps the same routine and the same schedule.
This is something that I think probably a lot of fans don't know. There's been so much focus on how are they going to schedule football with 16 teams. What is the scheduling model for you guys going forward? Because I assume you're not going to play 14 SEC series.
No, we're still only going to play 7 weekends. We're going to do a 7-year rotation. We're not going to do rivalry games in our sport. And it was discussed by our coaches association that our sport really wasn't going to benefit from it because of the size of our facilities. Like, we're selling out regardless of who we're playing. And it's not like we're going to draw 25,000 people just because we're playing a rivalry game. Like, our facilities are what they are. Unless we're going to have other conversations on growing our facilities to be much larger, then it might make sense. So we're not going to have rivalry games like they're going to have in baseball and in a lot of other sports. So we do a 7-year rotation that within 7 years, we'll play everybody home and away. Everyone will play that opponent within our conference within their 4-year career. It just won't be a home and away.
Okay. And then it's, I assume just, hey, it's standings 1 to 15 when you're getting to postseason. We're not talking about divisions or breaking anything apart.
No, we're not going to break anything in half. It'll be seeding based on your winning percentage. We will have to add a couple more games on the Tuesday of the SEC tournament to have 3 games on that Tuesday. So it'll be almost like playing games. But again, we're adamant in having all 15 teams being in the SEC tournament because all 15 have a possibility to be able to be in the NCAA tournament. And it's just embarrassing if you have a team that's not making the SEC tournament and has an RPI strong enough to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. You mentioned at the beginning, obviously, off season is very busy recruiting and stuff. What's summer like for you? I mean, what's the schedule in the calendar?
So when we finished super regionals, that we had exit meetings immediately with our players to kind of wrap up the season and then focus on what they need to do in the summer. So that's a really fast turnaround to go from such an emotional experience playing in supers and your season ending to then immediately flip a switch and, okay, now we got to focus on 24-25 the next day. And then I had to head down to the College World Series. So I didn't have a lot of time to be able to decompress and reflect back on the season until probably about last week. So right now we're on the recruiting trail. We are traveling all across the country out every single week. 2 staff members left today for Colorado, and we have 2 more, including myself, leaving tomorrow to head out to Colorado. But it's every week until the middle of August that we're out looking at high school age kids, 25 graduates, 26s, 27s, because September 1st opens up our contact period that we're able to communicate with rising juniors and get them on campus for official visits.
And I was going to say, generally in female sports, the recruiting seems to start so much earlier, right? You're not recruiting seniors in high school. You're recruiting sophomores and sometimes even freshmen in high school and watching what they're doing in the summer.
So always watching everybody. I mean, there's times that we had a camp yesterday and we had 2030s, which are 7th graders in our camp. So we're always watching. We're always evaluating. We're adding kids to lists. As the older they get, we can add, we can delete if we don't see that they're progressing the way that we are anticipating. We can't communicate with anyone until they're going to be a junior, September 1st of their junior year. So all emails, text correspondence, phone calls, on-campus visits can't happen to then. That we slowed down that process a couple years ago because it was ridiculous that we were having 8th and 9th graders committing to our institutions and having conversations with 13-year-olds about what you want to do in college.
Right. I don't even ask this jokingly. Like, how do you look at a 7th or 8th grade girl and think, well, that's somebody I need to recruit for 5 years down the road?
You look at their parents, honestly. You look at how their parents are built, the athleticism of their parents, but their body type. So you're kind of projecting what they might look like in a few years. You can pick out some of the genetic stuff, the DNA, if they have fast hands, fast feet. You can see if a kid's going to be a baller sometimes when they're like 5, 6 years old. But if you're committing kids when they're in 7th and 8th grade, like you're taking a big gamble and a big risk, especially if they haven't matured yet. So I'm really glad that the recruiting process slowed down, that we're able to wait until their junior year. And even now, because of the transfer portal, it slowed things down that you're even looking at kids going into their senior year because the ability to be able to transfer and go somewhere else has opened up a lot of doors. So there's always opportunity with additional scholarship money to be able to bring someone in late.
And you have to be as happy as I know I am that pretty soon the COVID year is off the books and you can go back to actually figuring out how much eligibility everyone has.
I think we're done with it.
Okay.
Yes, that was a battle in trying to figure out their 5th year, sometimes their 6th year if there was a medical red shirt, how much money you had available if they were a grad transfer and undergrad. I mean, a lot of logistics went into play in that. So I'm glad that's done. Now we can just really focus on your 4 years of eligibility.
Right. Last thing for you, kind of back to the specifics of your team. You talked about Lauren earlier, and look, I remember a couple of years ago, everybody was sitting here going, "Well, how did they replace Jordan Weber?" I mean, this is college sports, right? But Lauren Krings does leave a void. Is it Sierra Harrison? Are you looking at possibly Marissa McCann being a starter? What's the plan there?
I Sierra Harrison definitely can get the job done. She has the it factor. She's extremely competitive. She's proven that she can be very successful. I think Marissa McCann was really special this year and what she was able to do as a freshman and putting her in some really tough situations. And one that comes to mind is the SEC tournament against Arkansas, where she came in and it was 1st and 2nd with no outs. There was a defensive mishap that loaded up the bases with no outs, and she got out of that with 2 strikeouts. And for a freshman to be able to elevate her game, I think is just going to really be exciting for her career and what she's going to be able to bring to the future. We have a junior college transfer that's in. Her name is Courtney Donahue. She was the Division II Junior College National Player of the Year. So I'm excited to have her on staff. She's been extremely competitive and it's successful. So obviously it's a different level, different translation over, but she knows how to compete, and that's really huge. Lily Witten was a redshirt freshman, and when she was in the games, very competitive. I think we're going to get a lot out of her moving forward. And then, of course, we got our closer, Taylor Purnell. I mean, she's one that I think she's going to continue to love and embrace that role and, run her out there every opportunity we can. But again, still looking in the portal. So there's a couple out there that we'd love to be able to bring in and add to our pitching staff.
You're right. And I lied. If you have about 60 more seconds, last thing. I think a lot of fans noticed Coach Drinkwitz at a lot of your games and publicly supporting your team and all that. Everybody knows what a good football team can do for an athletic department. I assume you're a very interested observer the other way this fall for see what his team can do.
Without a doubt. And I just saw a tweet the other day that the college football team was playing fast pitch softball against the college softball team. And I sent it to Drink and I said, let's get this going. And he said, hell yeah, let's set it up. So that's something that we're going to be looking to do this fall and have a little fun with it. But I completely support Coach Drink and what he's done for athletic department and specifically softball. I mean, he's a girl dad and he brings his girls to the game and they come to camp and we can't do this without each other.
Yeah, unsolicited advice for Eli. Brady Cook and Luther Burden don't get to bat, and if they do, nobody's allowed to throw inside, right?
Okay, deal. We'll pat him up with some of those elbow guards and hand guards.
All right, Larissa, really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch up down the road.
Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it. MIZ.